As the NATO summit at The Hague gets underway, the American President Donald Trump has insisted that the American airstrikes on Iran have resulted in the total obliteration of Iran's nuclear capabilities. He was in fact backed by his cabinet members who claimed total wipeout of the nuclear conversion facility.
This was an unbelievable success. And the thing that hurts me is it's really demeaning to the pilots and the people that put that whole thing together, the generals. That was a perfect operation. And when you look at the holes, and this was done from 52,000 feet, there was no moon, there was no light, and those three holes are right together. And also, and nobody talks about this, we shot 30 Tomahawks from submarines, in particular one submarine, but that was 400 miles away. And every one of those Tomahawks hit within a foot of where they were supposed to hit. Took out a lot of buildings that Israel wasn't able to get. We took them out with Tomahawks. We don't even talk about that. This was a devastating attack.
Now, Trump, in fact, slammed reports by the CNN and the New York Times claiming that they were spreading fake news.
This was an unbelievable hit by genius pilots and genius people in the military, and they're not being given credit for it because we have that's in this group, and not all of you are. You have some great reporters, but you have CNN is MSDNC. The New York Times is they're bad people. They're sick. And what they've done is they're trying to make this unbelievable victory into something less.
The Trump statements come as 32 heads of NATO states or government attend the summit, which will focus on 5% defense spending target. The Russia-Ukraine war, China and West Asia are amongst the other key issues, amidst the underlying tensions on whether there would be a change in the U.S. foreign policy and also the future of U.S. military presence in Europe. Now, Trump is also slated to meet with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky on the sidelines of the summit. This is the war with Russia continues despite his efforts at mediation. All right, now joining us on the broadcast, we've got Ross Cullen, who's in fact joining us from The Hague, the place where this NATO summit is in fact unfolding. Ross, good to have you with us. Now, give us a sense of what in fact is unfolding at the moment there. 5% is the defense spending budget that the American president insists that all NATO nations must be spending on their defense. How enthusiastic are the Americans' European allies to increase their defense budgets to 5%?
Well, that seems to be the main aim of the discussions at this year's NATO summit. Can they get agreement from all of the member countries of the alliance to raise their national spending on defence to 5% of GDP, roughly split between 3.5% on core military operations like weapons and troops and 1.5% on infrastructure and industrial capacity and other defence-related activities. That's what they're hoping to be able to get agreement on, but it will have to be careful wording in the final communique because there are some countries like Spain who have a divergent position away from that of trying to attain 5%. So there might be some wriggle room in that communique for countries like Spain. Also, what there hasn't been firm agreement on yet is the timeline. Will countries have 5 years, 10 years or 15 years to bring this all into their national budget? So that's up for consideration as well. Donald Trump is here, the US president. He's been speaking just in the last half hour or so ahead of going into the short plenary session. That's the only session at this summit when all the leaders are getting together for talks. It will last around 2 to 3 hours. And he doubled down on his criticism of those US media outlets who are reporting this leak from the Pentagon about intelligence saying that perhaps the US strikes on Iran over the weekend were not complete obliteration, which is what the president says they were. The Pentagon suggesting that perhaps the United States has only set back Iran's nuclear capability by an order of months, not years. So the US president was pretty firm in his remarks, not swearing today like he did yesterday, but he was pretty firm in his remarks going into that plenary plenary session, which has just got underway here in The Hague in the Netherlands, which is hosting this year's summit. Mark Rutte, who is the NATO Secretary General, happens to be Dutch as well. He was the former Dutch Prime Minister, and he has been effusive in his praise for Donald Trump's role, particularly in the last few days, in terms of trying to bring about a ceasefire between Iran and Israel. So that is overshadowing this summit as well, and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky also in attendance, looking forward to his one-on-one with Donald Trump, hoping to be able to put more pressure on Vladimir Putin, potentially even agree another US package of sanctions to be applied on Moscow.
I think you've touched upon several important points that are on the agenda, and we heard that press briefing that the American President Donald Trump had along with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. During that conversation, one of the issues that of course came up was to what extent were the Iranian nuclear facilities damaged, because this is a huge controversy that has blown up, because there is a Pentagon's intelligence assessment which has been leaked within the American media, which indicates that the damage affected to the Iranian nuclear facilities is not as bad as the American president claims it to be. On what basis is the American president saying that the entire of the Iranian nuclear sites that were struck have been obliterated? Did he expand more on that?
Well, that's what the word that Donald Trump has been using to describe the impact of the United States strikes, the bombs that were dropped and the missiles that were fired as well by planes and submarines on Iran's three key nuclear facilities over the weekend. He has been using that word again and again, obliteration. However, this intelligence report leaked by the Pentagon and now being investigated by the FBI does seem to suggest that it has not had an impact of complete obliteration. The US Defense Secretary is also here in The Hague, Pete Hegseth, and he has said that these reports in the United States media are only designed to try to make the president look bad. And indeed, the president just a few moments ago described certain US outlets, including CNN, MSNBC and the New York Times, as, quote, scum. He said that they were trying to do so to portray a negative impact of the United States' bombing of those three sites, Fordo, Natanz and Isfahan in Iran over the weekend. So a lot of controversy. There already is an investigation underway in the United States to try to identify the source of that leak from the US Defense Department in the Pentagon, and we have had that doubling down from officials in the administration, from the President to the Defense Secretary this morning here in the Netherlands.
Indeed. Thank you very much, Ross Cullen, for joining us from The Hague and getting us all those updates. I will, of course, come back to you as more details emerge there.